Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about Seraphine, about KDA, and about how both of them, I believe, have been handled, or in some cases, mishandled as of late. Now, first and foremost, let's touch on Seraphine, because I feel like that's the easiest one to sort of discuss at the moment. Seraphine, I feel like design-wise, especially kit-wise in-game, she's fine. But character-wise, I feel like she doesn't fit in with League of Legends. And now, I'm saying this knowing that Zoe exists. Back when Zoe first came out, I think there was a fair argument to be made that Zoe doesn't match the aesthetic of League of Legends, that Zoe doesn't feel like she belongs as part of the universe. But I think that at the end of the day, Riot were able to sell that, yes, she totally does. And I could totally see Zoe even interact with characters like the other aspects of Targon or Aurelion Sol. Zoe's design, while very bright and cheery and at odds with a lot of the other champions in the game, I think still did enough to make her feel like a natural part of Runeterra and a natural part of League of Legends, rather than Seraphine. And even the sort of cutesy champions we've seen in the future after Zoe's success, which, let's be real, they got released because Zoe did well enough. So Nico and Lilia, I still feel like even though they're sort of cutesy champions, even though they're supposed to be more bright and cheery than a lot of the other champions we have in the game, they still feel like they belong to the game. So I can see a champion like Lilia interact with a champion like Yone, for example, or Nico interacting with Nidalee. Those interactions feel fair. They feel like they could actually happen in-game. Seraphine, conversely, is very flashy. She's too sequined. She has a very high-tech little rig she's wielding, which is very at odds with the Hextech aesthetic that the rest of Piltover and Zaun have. I would say that, we call it Hextech, but really it's sort of like steampunk, in that the technology obviously is quite high, and there are bits where you can see, yeah, technology, we don't have that kind of thing yet, but it's still a very basic form of technology, right? So Jace is still using these Hextech crystals to convert a hammer into a sort of energy cannon kind of deal, but he's still got the hammer form, which is just a regular hammer. This isn't a power hammer. This isn't a energy hammer. It's just a hammer. So that aesthetic makes sense. I think that kind of makes, a good deal of like, okay, yeah, that sort of could fit into the universe. And then when you see champions like Camille, who may be slightly more technologically advanced than some of the other characters in the game, it still ends up feeling like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. The things that Camille can do match the in-universe expectations of what is possible. Seraphine, meanwhile, doesn't really have that. It really kind of does feel like Seraphine has a stage that looks like it belongs out of sci-fi. Her character looks like she is from an isekai, and she's the character who's been dropped into another world. I don't really feel like her design in particular feels like League of Legends. And now that is slightly a problem, because I feel like League normally does such a good job of getting different aesthetics to feel at home in their universe. This is a game where you have flintlock wielding characters alongside automatic rifle wielding characters, alongside magic wielding characters, and warriors and barbarians and giants and dragons, and you're able to fit in a ton of different aesthetics into League of Legends, and they've all felt like they belong, with the exception of Seraphine. And I think that a big portion of this is because of how Seraphine was handled in her spoilers and her teasers leading up to her eventual reveal. Seraphine was revealed to us on Twitter. She was a Twitter personality. She tweeted out very humorous things and pictures of herself and her cat and did selfies and that sort of a thing. And while none of those activities are necessarily wrong, and I think it was an interesting way to go about teasing a champion, I do think it was the wrong choice for Seraphine, because, and I've talked about this before in a previous video, which I will have linked down in the description if you guys are interested in seeing that, but I don't feel like introducing a character in their alternate universe is a good idea for the game going forward, because it becomes then hard to differentiate the character's alternate universe personality and alternate universe character and their in-universe character, because you sort of start saying, I've just met Seraphine, who is she, what she's like, and then Riot says, but that's not technically Seraphine. This is who Seraphine actually is, but because your perceptions are still colored by your initial meeting of the character, it's hard to differentiate them. In fact, even Riot had to say at the beginning of their champion insights for Seraphine, they're like, yeah, except that's not the Seraphine we're talking to you about. We're not talking about the Seraphine collaborating with KDA. We're not talking about Twitter Seraphine. We're talking about the actual canon Seraphine. You know, that one that we've never talked to you about before, and you've only been seeing this other one for literal months at this point. And so I feel like that is a problem because the Runeterra Seraphine feels more like the alternate universe, and KDA Seraphine feels like the canon, which is, you can understand how that's maybe a problem with how the character is perceived and how the character was introduced. Now, like, I get why Riot did it, because they were trying to ship the ultimate skin with her release, and they needed everything to line up with KDA, so they had to start the Twitter account way in advance so she would have enough body of tweets that she feels like a character, and we can see her growth from just someone in their apartment recording songs into someone who gets to collaborate with KDA. I do get that. As an aside, it is a little bit weird how that ultimate skin is reverse of ultimate skin, and you have to pick one form before you play the game as opposed to being able to convert freely, but that's a topic for another day. But so either way, it does feel like Seraphine at the end of the day feels more like it feels like KDA Seraphine, like I said, is the character, and KDA Seraphine, Runeterra Seraphine is not the character at all, that this is the alternate universe. And I do think part of that problem is because she's coming with the ultimate skin that reinforces the fact that KDA Seraphine is the sort of main universe. Like, that's a playable fantasy you already have in game. This isn't something we waited to get for a little bit. Even if it had come out with, let's say, regular Seraphine and Star Guardian Seraphine, and then just even a month later, they're like, oh, look, it's the ultimate skin because KDA is coming out, and it's for Seraphine, and it's KDA Seraphine, and we're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. At the very least, then we have an opportunity to see Seraphine in the League of Legends environment on her own, as opposed to always with KDA, always with KDA. We're going to reveal the character finally, but we have to talk about KDA in the teaser because otherwise people will be confused as to what universe does she belong in. And again, I feel like that is a problem. And sort of, I feel like that's the biggest problem I'm having, especially with how KDA's been handled, because I think Seraphine could have been fine if not for the fact that everything had to line up for the KDA release. And now, I don't think it's fair to say Riot shouldn't focus on KDA. I think that makes no sense at all. KDA is hugely popular. I still like it. I like the songs they've put out. It's great. But it does feel like Riot are stepping over the line this time around. Pentakill's second album, for example, did get some hype, but not nearly as much as we've got this time around. We have crossover cosmetics in Teamfight Tactics and Legends of Runeterra, which doesn't make any sense at all in Legends of Runeterra because Seraphine isn't even in that game yet. It feels like there's a huge focus on making sure everything comes out all at the same time for KDA. And at the same time, there will be more skins for the KDA champions, which does give me the question of, okay, so if KDA comes back every year, are these 4 champions going to get a new skin every time they come around? And if that's the case, then, you know, are Ari and Evelyn and Akali's, are their skin catalogs going to be half KDA and half, you know, normal League of Legends skins at that point? Is this going to be a problem with these characters being perceived as more closely associated with KDA than as their actual canon appearances? I think these are all problems that could arise. I do think that Riot will be able to handle it. After all, they did take a year off between KDA albums to focus on True Damage. They were able to put out another Pentakill album with another one coming up in the future. So I do feel like they hopefully have answers to these questions and more, but it is sort of the thing where I'm a little bit concerned about it in the future given how big it is. And so either way, I've rambled on too long about this. This was a bit of a rant, guys, so I do apologize if you're expecting something a little bit more concerted. But either way, that's kind of where I'm at with both Seraphine and with the KDA reveals. And I do have some suggestions, though, for Riot games in the future. First and foremost, I think champions need to be shown in their in-universe style to set expectations for who they are as a character first. You need to see the character as they are going to appear in the actual lore and in the actual game before we see how they're going to appear elsewhere, because I think that sets better expectations for who they are, and I think then it makes the alternate universes feel a little bit better. And in that regard, I feel like characters should not be releasing with legendary or ultimate skins, because those are essentially alternate fantasies for the character. Even if you think about other legendary or ultimate skins for existing characters, so let's take Etherwing Kale, for example, where she's sort of a space cop from the distant future. Okay, well, that's a different skin fantasy than Base Kale, who's the aspect of justice on Runeterra, who's very dispassionate justice. Then there's at least a comparison to be made there, and in fact, Etherwing Kale ends up looking kind of fun from that perspective, because you can see how dispassionate justice, an aspect of that, can get brought into a sci-fi universe as sort of this cop who the only job she wants to do is enforce the law and the letter of the law, and she doesn't care about anything else. That's a fun comparison. And you can make that because you've gotten to know Kale as who she is as a character beforehand, as opposed to, again, Seraphine, where you've gotten to know her as the pop star and as the sort of, musician in the real world before we got to know what she's like in Runeterra. And I think that you generally need to at least have a plan for how KDA is going to be handled in the future. I think that there are a lot of things that Riot can do to make that feel slightly better and to generally just tone it back a little bit. I don't necessarily mind all the cosmetics. I do think that if you're gonna monetize KDA, which you have to find a way to do it somehow, you needed to release cosmetics, and it's fun to have crossover events. But I do think that we could tone it down very slightly, especially with the releases for skins for these characters. But those are just my opinions in general on both the Seraphine reveal and on the sort of way Riot have handled KDA this time around. So let me know what you guys are thinking of all this down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts, especially if you disagree. I would love to hear if you guys think that Seraphine was handled perfectly. Let me know that. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on why you think Riot have done a good job of setting Seraphine up. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.